You're listening to the Jam Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guests are Holly Black and Aron Eli Coleite, who are, well, gosh, Aron and Holly are doing so much, but we're going to be talking about Spiderwick Chronicles. Holly wrote the book that the Spiderwick Chronicles is based on, and Aron is the producer, director, writer. You've done a lot of things on this project, Aron. You can let everybody know what you've done. But this is a brand new series that just premiered on Roku and just recently. And we're going to do a deep dive into the Spiderwick Chronicles. Holly, let's start with you because you co-wrote this book, series of books, actually, a big series of books. So tell us a little bit about the germination of how you came up with this concept and how do you co-write it? You co-wrote, and it does talk about your co-writer.
Yes, I'm
Awesome.
missing my co-creator, Tony DeLizzi, today. I'm very sad. I will be representing us both here. Thank you so much for having us. So long ago, Tony and I we had been friends and we had talked about wanting to do a project. Initially, we had talked about wanting to do this magical field guide that, laid out these different creatures from folklore. And at the time, we shared an editor on our individual projects, and he talked to us about books, to sort of introduce the field guide. And we thought, look, sure, okay. And we went away and talked to each other about what those books could be. And that's where we came up with the story of Jared, Simon, and Mallory, the three kids who discover their great great uncle Arthur Spiderwick's field guide to fairies, and then discover that all of the things in it are true. And the reason that we have nothing listed where we're just co-creators is because while I largely wrote and Tony largely drew, we sent a lot of ideas back and forth and we brainstormed together so much that we really blurred the traditional lines.
Amazing. So now this series of books. So when you started, did you think it was going to be a series of books? Did you think, okay, we're going to start with this and then go to that next, next book? Or how did it all evolve? Because how many books are there? Six or
Well, there were initially we what
how many
did you
books are
there were initially five in the original series plus the field guide. And then there were three in the Beyond the Spiderwick series, and there are a couple of other books like a notebook for fantastical observations and a field guide to sprites and that kind of thing. We did after we realized it wasn't just the field guide, we did think it would be the five books. We had sort of plotted it out for five, but we did not at that time realize we would be doing any more.
and then it was so popular, you had to do more. It was a New York Times best-selling series, so you had to write more. I'm sure. I guess you couldn't just stop with that. You had to definitely write more. So this was a successful film back in 2008, I believe.
2008.
So Aron, how did you get involved and why did you all decide that this needed to be a series now?
I got involved. The studio reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to take a swing and a crack at adapted Spider Chronicles. And I had been a huge fan of the books and the movie. I read them to my kids when they were young, and they loved them. And my son is devouring them now, so it just shows how timeless they are.
Yes.
But actually, initially, I don't know I don't know if you know. Initially, I said no. Um, I said no because I had just done Lock and Key, and my niche is very particular of families moving to Victorian mansions and finding out that magic exists. And I had done that in Lock and Key, and I was like, all right, I did that already. And some, very, very wise people at Paramount, namely Nicole Clemens, asked me, just read the book again. I know you love the book. Read it again, and just please take another look. And I did. And my almost it's now been over 4 years since I've been working with Tony and Holly on this show, which is kind of amazing. But we have to remember this was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And when I was rereading it, the biggest thing that left out to me, was, just how timeless, how magical, how to quote Holly, how numinous these books are. But the thing that really touched me was Jared's story, especially with how different he feels. And there's a line that just broke my heart when I read it, which is Jared says to his mom, the only thing that Simon and I, his twin brother, have in common is we can wear the same size pants. And that just spoke to me about so much of what it feels to be different, to be neurodiverse, to have emotional issues. And I was witnessing this firsthand with my own teenagers as they were processing a pandemic, suffering through their own depression and anxiety. And I thought, wow, this is what an incredible story that was at that point written, only 18 years ago, but how prescient it is about how kids' emotions and how much they need. And I thought this was an amazing opportunity to discuss this through the fantasy lens, but actually make a forum for kids to not only accept their neurodiversity, their mental health issues, and understand that we're trying to destigmatize that. We can make a forum where people cannot feel shame about these emotions and understand that it's not about solving it, it's about accepting it. Right. And that was what, when I first talked to Holly and Tony, that's what I said. And then we started talking about all of our inspirations, and I happened to reach out. It was in a different room in my house, but I reached behind me and I was like, it's these books. It was Brian Froud's Fairies, and it was my original Dungeons and Dragons monster manual. So once we realized that, we spoke the same language and that we could really collaborate on making the adaptation from book to television series, was when I was like, oh, I'm in. I really want this job. And they had many other amazing writers to choose from, and I'm so honored and appreciative that they chose to go with me.
That is wonderful. And so it's interesting, you did have the same language that you had fairy and dragon language, for sure, in common. Holly, so when you decided were you involved in the film itself when the writing of any part of the film when it came out in 2008?
We did not write any part of the film.
Okay.
We were involved in the sort of executive producer way. We saw stuff. We got to comment on it. Did they have any thoughts or feelings about our comments? Unclear, but we were allowed to see stuff and we were allowed to comment on it.
Okay.
For writers and artists.
So with this project, you're very actively involved in it this time around. You and Tony are very actively involved in it. So how much did you have to, how hard or difficult was it to translate what you had written in the books to now put it into this series?
I mean, I don't know if hard is the right word. I mean, Holly, I'm really curious about your answer to this.
Well, what I was just going to say that I feel like one of the things that I learned is that, film is a medium of compression, right? And even though the 5 books are kind of like slim little volumes, there still couldn't be everything in the books, whereas television is a medium of expansion. And, one of the journeys that Aron was taking us on is the journey of following all of these individual characters, including the villain for the first time. What is Mulgrat's inner pain? Not something we got to see before. And then also, introducing even more characters, new characters who we would follow. And so part of it was saying, what is the important stuff? What is the heart? And, can we make sure that makes it into the show? And beyond that, let it be what it wants to be, because it's going to be a new thing.
Yeah, and it kind of has to be a new thing. And it had to be a new thing. One is the marching orders from the network was also to age it up. And so in aging it up, a lot of things transform, change. The characters change a bit because they are in a different place in their lives. And in adapting to a television show, you do have this whole world that you need to build out more of friends, family members, people that we didn't get the chance to meet in the books. They need to now populate this world. And how are they going to populate it? And how do you do that while still staying true to the DNA of the characters and not diverting from their goals, their missions, who they are? Um, it's a bit of a high wire act. And, you know, with the authors, and they were in the writers' room for the first month, and we had many conversations when we were coming up with the Bible. It does still feel like I have a safety net there, because when I would go askew, or when the writers would throw out an idea that didn't jibe with the DNA of the show, we were always having, and sometimes tough conversations and sometimes easier conversations of, that's not Spiderwick, and you have to rein it back and you have to make it more Spiderwicky. And hopefully hopefully we still accomplish that even 4 years later.
So what's Spiderwicky mean? Now that you've thrown that out there.
Well, it's a really good question. I think that, the one instance that really comes to mind where we really diverted from the books was Rick Simon back to New York to see his father, who didn't make the trip with them to Henson. And in doing that, the books are, one of the things that's awesome about them is how the kids interact with nature and feel very organic. And we're taking them to a city, and that's very not Spiderwicky. And when we have him interact with a certain creature, of a different, of different folk, like that's where we really started to dig in of like, what is Spiderwicky? How do we make a journey to the city that feels like, now that he's older, he would run away. He would want to go see his father. This is a very natural instinct for a teenage boy to do. And he's old enough to to want to do it. But what makes a city Spiderwicky? And originally, when we were first talking about it, it was feeling broader. It wasn't feeling right. And then we had a really great conversation of, it's more like an apothecary. We need to feel like the herbs and the potions, and that's what's going to make this feel, even though we're telling a different story, still feel like of the books.
Wonderful. And how
Would you
difficult.
say that's accurate? I don't know.
What do you think, Holly? Was it accurate?
I mean, I think that, when Tony and I came into the writer's room, we had, a particular agenda, right? Was to emphasize how important the folklore was, how important authenticity to the folklore, whatever you used was, and, who the characters were. And I remember particularly making a page for my Allowed Fairies to Lie, and how much fun it actually is. And it doesn't honor, but I really I feel like, it is really fun. And so I think that there are these specific elements of, the characters letting Jared be angry, letting there be those kind of conflicts and banter between the family members that is, part of a loving and normal family, but is not always represented, as people having that kind of level of tension and also love,
Right.
and I think Aron did such a wonderful job of connecting with it. And I do think it's because, of course, because he's a great writer, but also because we have a shared language. It was something he loved too.
And that's where it all starts, from love. Loving.
Completely. Well,
Yeah.
and having Tony and Holly, like, for Holly to say I'm a great writer, like Holly's an amazing writer, and the work that was done in this was really did all come from love. and wanting to make something that audiences would fall in love with all over again.
And a whole new generation, a whole new audience. And I think because the books were a series and that you're doing this in, a series, that you could get more, as you say, you could expand on the characters and add more to it. But it translates better, I think, in a series because it's not so compact as it was in the film. Would you agree with that, Holly? We're frozen again, unfortunately.
Would I agree that I could agree that it could expand out infinitely? What was the
Yeah,
meat
did
of the
I freeze up?
question?
We're both.
I got confused in it. I think I thought it was going to be for Aron. I was like, yes, tell me about how the series will expand. All
All
I
right,
have
Aron.
all the answers.
Aron, why don't you answer that question?
How the series will
Like, Holly off.
Absolutely. I think that there, to the root of your question, I really think that movies and television are just different forms of storytelling.
Yes.
And in the movie, you do have a limited amount of time to tell the most amount of story, and the stakes are extremely high. It's like the movie the difference between them is, in my opinion, of the different routes we took in storytelling, is the movie is a castle siege. The movie is they find the field guide, they need to protect it from Mulgrath, who is consistently going after it and attacking them. And we can't sustain that type of storytelling in 8 episodes. It is just like, you can't do that. You can't maintain that tension. And so that's why we went, really almost from jump, we went to a different type of style of storytelling, which is quest style. And that's why we took the pages out of the field guide and have our heroes trying to get them back. And Mulgrath trying to manipulate them and instead of trying to seize the book from them. And that gives us so many places to go. Talking about expanding storytelling, it gives us, much more ramp of where are these pages? What are the pages? Where are they hidden? So we can tell those stories for seasons to come, because in the first season, really, we only found, I think, 6 in total out of 86. So there's plenty more pages out there. There's plenty more pages that plenty of other races and creatures are hunting for and want. And that is certainly how we get to expand it and continuously get to tell stories. The other thing is, one of the reasons why we chose books 1 and 5 to adapt is because, Mulgrath is an amazing villain. And book 1, the villain is basically Thimbletack in my, kind of in my opinion. He's not a villain, but he's an annoyance. And a friend looking. So we wanted to make sure that we had a really good villain for the Grace family to combat in season 1. So, okay, we're gonna mush these together and make a cohesive story. But then that certainly leaves open so much more storytelling that the initial 5 books leaves us to go down. I want to go down to the realm of the fairies. There's the dwarves. There's goblins, hobgoblins. This season, we didn't get the opportunity to introduce Hogsqueal, which I know a lot of fans are like, where's Hogsqueal? I wanted him too. Sometimes budget dictates how many creatures you can have. But it also left the door open soon enough.
See, he was the right person for that to answer.
You were right, Holly. So obviously you're opening the door for season 2.
That is the hope. I mean, certainly, we're just, I feel like I'm like on a newscast. We are just getting word. This past weekend, Spiderwick, and a Deadline article just came out about it. We were the most watched on-demand show in the history of Roku.
Wow.
So
wow.
It feels pretty spectacular that we resonated so deeply with Roku's audience and how much they're embracing the show. And it's growing day by day.
That's great.
That feels really amazing.
Yeah.
So all of our fingers are firmly crossed, and we need, more data, and we need to see how it continues. But we would love to do more seasons.
Well, good. I'm
They gotta
sure
get
the
those
audience
pages.
would. Go ahead, Holly.
No, I was just saying they got to get those pages.
Yeah, they do, and I'm sure the audience would agree that they want more. They want definitely more, for sure. Well, let's talk about the casting because you've got a wonderful cast here, and you know, Christian Slater, perfect casting, I think. He's it's good to see him. I always enjoy him. You know, and he plays well. Why don't you go ahead and Aron, you tell me who he plays and
He
how he
play
plays him.
he plays Mulgrath. He plays our ogre. And he's amazing. I feel we're so fortunate that he was interested and that he wanted to play in the sandbox with us,
Mm-hmm.
because he brought so much to the role. You know, one of the early things that we were talking about in this version of Mulgrath, because in the movie, certainly, he is a brute. He is a force, and
Mm-hmm.
that is a very physical threat. And in order to manipulate Jared and Simon and Mallory into getting the pages for him, because he can't get those pages himself, he's a different type of villain. He's more cerebral. He is more manipulative and Machiavellian. And that is something that Christian pulls off so wonderfully. He is so sly and so manipulative of these kids, and as well as the whole family, even Ellen. Um, and he just does it with such glee and delight in how he is pulling their string
Oh, you froze up again.
to work with. Is everything okay?
Yeah, now it is again.
Uh,
Sorry about this.
no worries. It's just, and then it comes down to we wrote him to be humorous and menacing at the same time. And we wrote because we wanted a villain that was really fleshed out, that felt like that he had a desire that was purely rational to him, and that he had a point of view of this insane world that humans live in. And he executed both the humor and the menace to, I think pretty brilliantly.
He
That
does.
was,
Go
that
ahead,
was
Holly.
fantastic. There's this fantastic episode, which I will not spoiler, but it's called where he and the kid who plays Jared, Lion Daniels, go head to head in this kind of cat and mouse. I think Lion called it Peter Pan and Hook, like psychological back and forth episode that is super tense. And it's the opposite of a brute, right? It's all psychological.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's more interesting.
It's just different,
Right.
it was a kind of, when we started breaking the season, we knew that was inevitably going to have to happen. This real, whether it's Hook and Pan or Lecter and Clarice, like this is a psychological game that they're playing with each other, and now we're going to pit them head to head for the entire episode. I was very fortunate that I got to direct that episode, and got to see it firsthand, and watching them play together. And I use the word play very loosely because they're really combating each other throughout. And seeing Lion, who is a tremendous, tremendous actor, go up against Christian Slater was an amazing feat to watch, of seeing him rise to the level and seeing him give back as much as he got from Christian, and just seeing the two of them work together was a thrill.
That's wonderful. I know. What a great experience for that young actor to be with someone of Christian Slater's status, stature at this, and he's been doing it a long time too. So,
He's been doing it a long time, and Christian and I had these discussions going into because it is a fraught episode. Talking about mental health, talking about you know, this tete-a-tete between these characters. There's a lot of history that comes up, and it's very emotional, and it gets to a very dark place. And Christian, kind of pulled me aside, and he was like, "So I really want to push, like, I'm going to push him. I really want to get an emotional reaction out of him. This is going beyond the lines. This is going beyond anything." And we were shooting the whole scene, this whole, really awful scene. We were shooting handheld, and I was like, "Okay, to the camera operator, you got to just follow them, make sure you're catching them. And if you don't catch them, it's fine. because they're just going to play. They know they're blocking, but Christian's really going to go for it here. And it became so visceral and so real. It was hard to call cut because I was just getting lost so much in their performances.
Wow. 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 That's wonderful when that happens. That's magic, actually. Magic, the magic of movies. Well, thank you both for being on the show. It's a really wonderful discussion about the making of this great series on Roku, the Spiderwick Chronicles. Everybody go seek it out. I mean, adults as well as children will enjoy this. It's one of those series you can sit down as a family and watch and have good discussions about after it. For sure. So thank you both for being on the show. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you much success and good luck with, hopefully you'll have season 2.
Fingers
Thank
crossed.
you
Thank
so
you so much
much.
for having us, Jan.
You're welcome. Have a great day.